The silence in our marriage had become a language of its own, a dialect of unspoken resentments and questions. I was too afraid to ask. Marcus and I had built a beautiful life, a fortress of shared dreams with the final cornerstone about to be laid, our first child. I cherished the tiny flutter in my belly as a secret promise between us. But then I discovered his secret, a promise he'd made to someone else. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was building a second life on the rubble of ours. And the day he took her to a baby scan, I decided it was time to tear his world down to the studs. The Carter residence in the manicured suburbs of Chestnut Hill was a testament to meticulous planning. It was a classic Georgian revival, all symmetrical windows and stately brick, a house I had personally helped redesign. I'm Amelia Hayes, an architect, and I find comfort in structure, in blueprints where every line has a purpose. For 7 years, my life with Marcus Carter had felt like a perfect blueprint. He was a charismatic, ruthlessly successful hedge fund manager, a man who moved through the world with an unnerving confidence that I'd once found magnetic. Our life was a series of beautifully executed plans: the wedding, the house, the calculated career moves. Finally, the baby. After 2 years of trying, the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test felt like the final triumphant flourish on our masterpiece. Marcus had wept. He'd held me against his chest, his expensive Tom Ford suit be damned, and whispered, "Everything, Amelia. We finally have everything." But in the months that followed, the architecture of our marriage began to show hairline fractures. At first, they were almost imperceptible. Late nights at the office became more frequent, explained away by a volatile market. Business trips to Singapore and London were booked with less than a day's notice. When he was home, he was a ghost in our machine of a house, his body present, but his mind elsewhere. The easy laughter that once filled our cavernous living room was replaced by the tap-tap-tap of his fingers on a second work-only phone he now carried. "It's just for international clients, honey," he'd said, kissing the top of my head in a way that felt more like a dismissal than affection. "Keeps the time zones straight." I wanted to believe him. I was pregnant hormonal, and my world was narrowing to due dates and nursery colors. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the pressure of impending fatherhood was simply manifesting as stress. The real tremor, the one that cracked the foundation wide open, came on a Tuesday. I was 17 weeks along. The morning sickness had finally subsided, and I was feeling a fragile sense of optimism. Marcus had left early for a board meeting. I was working from my home office, reviewing blueprints for a new city library, when a notification popped up on our shared family calendar on my laptop. We used it for everything: dentist appointments, dinner reservations, bill due dates. The entry was for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. It read, "Baby's first scan. I." My breath caught in my throat. My own 20-week anatomy scan was scheduled for the week after. I stared at the entry, my mind refusing to process the implication. Baby's first scan. Whose baby? And who was I? My first thought was that it was a mistake, a typo. Maybe he was planning a surprise for me, but the cold dread coiling in my stomach told me otherwise. I clicked on the event details. It was created by Marcus. The location was not my OB-GYN's office, but a private boutique clinic across town, the Genesis Prenatal Imaging Center, a place known for its high-end ultrasound packages and extreme discretion. My fingers trembled as I typed the name into a search engine. The clinic's website was filled with glowing testimonials from wealthy clients. This wasn't an NHS clinic. This was a luxury experience. The letter burned into my retinas. Isabella. The name surfaced from the depths of my memory like a piece of wreckage. A few months ago at a fundraiser for the museum, Marcus had spent a little too long talking to a striking brunette in a green silk dress. She was an art gallery assistant he'd mentioned casually later. Her name was Isabella Rossi. I remember thinking she was beautiful, and I remember the flicker of annoyance I felt at how she touched his arm when she laughed. Marcus had dismissed it. She's just a kid, Amelia. Ambitious. Trying to network. The blood drained from my face. My hands went cold. I stood up my own baby, fluttering inside me as if sensing my distress, and walked on autopilot to his home office. The room was immaculate just as he'd left it. His work laptop was closed on the desk. His personal one, the one we shared, was the one I used. But the second phone, the international one, was sitting on the charger. He'd forgotten it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I'd never violated his privacy before. Our marriage was built on trust, or so I'd thought. But trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. My hand shook as I picked it up. It was unlocked. I didn't need to dig deep. The message thread at the top was with a contact saved as Isa. I opened it. The screen was filled with a language of intimacy that was not ours. Hundreds of messages. Pet names. Good morning, my love. I miss you. Can't wait to see you tonight. And then I scrolled down my vision, blurring with tears. Isa. Are you sure Amelia doesn't suspect anything, Marcus? She's completely wrapped up in her own pregnancy. She doesn't have a clue. You and our little peanut are my future. You know that, Isa. I'm so excited for the scan on Thursday. To finally see him or her, Marcus me too. I'll tell Amelia I have a last-minute meeting. It's all taken care of. I love you. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the mahogany desk. The sound echoed in the silent house. He didn't just have a mistress. His mistress was pregnant, and he was using the same loving words, the same promises of a future on both of us. We were two different projects, two separate blueprints for a life he was trying to build simultaneously. I sank into his leather office chair, the scent of his cologne clinging to the upholstery, and I felt a grief so profound it was physical. It was a pressure in my chest, a hollowness in my gut. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing the entire reality I had meticulously built and believed in. The tears came, then hot and silent. I didn't sob. I just let them stream down my face, mourning the death of the man I thought I married. After an hour, or maybe it was 2, the grief began to cool. It hardened into something else, something cold and sharp and clear. Anger. I was an architect. I knew that when a foundation is rotten, you don't patch it up. You demolish it. You clear the site. And you build something new, something stronger on your own terms. My baby kicked a tiny, insistent pulse. It was a reminder. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I wiped my tears, picked up my own phone, and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in months, but a contact I knew I would need. Naomi, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It's Amelia. I need a lawyer. No, I need a shark. Naomi Bennett had been my best friend since university. We were an odd pairing, me, the measured architect who found beauty in lines and angles, her, the fiery litigator who found it in a perfectly executed cross-examination. While I built things up, Naomi was an expert at tearing them down to their essential legal truths. When she answered the phone, her voice was warm, but it turned to ice as I laid out the facts in a flat, emotionless tone. The bastard was her first succinct analysis. The absolute gold-plated trust fund bastard. He's taking her to a private swan on Thursday at 2. I said, my voice devoid of the tremor I felt inside. The Genesis Center on Albright Avenue. Good, Naomi said, and I could hear the clicking of her keyboard. That's our stage, public but contained. Perfect. I spent the next 48 hours in a fugue state, moving through my life with the detached precision of a robot. I made Marcus his morning coffee. I asked about his board meeting, and smiled blandly as he spun a web of lies so intricate it was almost impressive. He spoke of quarterly reports and shareholder anxieties, and all I could see was the text message, "You and our little peanut are my future." Each lie was another brick in the wall he was building between us, and it was a wall I was now meticulously planning to bring down. While he was at the office, I was in Naomi's. Her corner office overlooking the city felt like a war room. Papers were spread across a vast glass table. Naomi dressed in a razor-sharp suit, paced like a caged tiger. "Okay, Amelia," she began, pointing a pen at me. "We can go in there, and you can scream at him. It would be cathartic, I'm sure. But he'll paint you as the hysterical, hormonal wife. Men like Marcus are masters of flipping the narrative. We are not going to give him that satisfaction. We are going to hit him with something he understands." "And what's that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Naomi stopped pacing and leaned over the table, her eyes glinting. "Consequences. Financial, legal, and social. We're not just going to expose him. We're going to hamstring him." Our plan was audacious and required moving at lightning speed. Naomi explained that a simple confrontation was fleeting. We needed leverage. The affair and the second pregnancy were our moral high ground, but the law cared more about assets than broken hearts. "He's funding this entire second life," Naomi reasoned. "The gift's her apartment, I bet my salary. He's leased a place for her. The dinners, the medical bills. Where is that money coming from?" "Our joint accounts. His salary," I offered. "Exactly. Marital assets. He is actively draining the resources of the marriage to support his infidelity. That's not just immoral. It's financial malfeasance. It's a breach of fiduciary duty to the marital estate." She said the words with a grim satisfaction. The first step was to prove it. Naomi had a man for that. Not a private investigator in the trench coat and fedora sense, but a forensic accountant named Mr. Davies, who was a bloodhound for digital paper trails. While I pretended to be choosing between duck egg blue and seafoam green for the nursery walls, Mr. Davies was deep in the digital labyrinth of our finances. Marcus, in his arrogance, had been sloppy. The report came back less than 24 hours later. It was a gut-wrenching validation of my worst fears. A lease agreement for a luxury condo on the waterfront, signed by Marcus Carter 3 months ago. Credit card statements filled with charges from Cartier Chanel and exclusive restaurants I'd never been to with him. And the most damning piece of evidence, a wire transfer of $50,000 to Isabella Rossi, with the memo line reading "For our new beginning." Seeing it all in black and white, the sheer scale of his deception was staggering. He wasn't just cheating, he was building an entirely separate, lavish existence. Armed with this evidence, Naomi drafted an emergency petition. We weren't filing for divorce. Not yet. That was a move to be made from a position of power. This was different. We were petitioning for an ex parte temporary restraining order. This TRO will do two things, Naomi explained, her voice precise. First, it will immediately freeze all major joint bank accounts and investment portfolios. He won't be able to move a dime without a court order. Second, it grants you temporary exclusive use and possession of the marital home. He will not be allowed to set foot on the property. Can a judge grant that so quickly? Without him present, I asked the scope of it, making me feel dizzy. That's the ex parte part, Naomi said with a thin smile. It means from one party. We are presenting evidence that immediate and irreparable harm will be done to the marital estate if we wait for a full hearing. He's actively liquidating assets. The judge will grant it. I'll make sure of it. She was as good as her word. On Wednesday afternoon, Naomi called me from the courthouse. "We got it," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. "Signed and sealed by Judge Miller herself. The order is active the moment it is served to him." The plan was set. Naomi had hired a professional process server, a stoic man named Frank, who would accompany me. I was to serve Marcus the papers myself. The law didn't require it, but Naomi and I agreed it was a necessary piece of theatre. "He needs to see you," Naomi had insisted, "not as a victim, but as the agent of his downfall. He needs to see that you did this, you." On Thursday morning, I woke up before dawn. The house was silent. Marcus was sleeping soundly beside me, his arm draped possessively over my growing belly, even in his sleep. The hypocrisy was so profound it almost made me laugh. I carefully slid out of bed and went to the closet. I didn't choose a power suit like Naomi would have. I chose a simple, elegant, navy blue maternity dress. It was a dress Marcus had bought for me a month ago, telling me how radiant I looked in it. I did my hair and makeup with meticulous care. I wanted to look beautiful. I wanted to look strong. I wanted to be the very picture of the woman he was throwing away. When I was ready, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. My hand rested protectively on my stomach. The baby was quiet, as if sensing the impending storm. In my other hand, I held a large manila envelope. Inside was the court order. It felt heavier than any blueprint I had ever carried. It was the plan for the demolition. I met Frank, the process server, at a coffee shop a block away from the Genesis clinic. He was a large, impassive man who looked like he'd served papers in every dramatic situation imaginable. "You ready, Mrs. Carter?" he asked, his tone professional but not unkind. "It's Ms. Hayes, actually," I replied, my voice clear and cold. "Amelia Hayes." It was the first time I had consciously reclaimed my own name. He nodded slowly. "Okay, Ms. Hayes. I'll be right behind you. Just give me the signal." We walked to the clinic. It was exactly as I'd pictured, discreet, modern, with a frosted glass door. I took a deep, steadying breath, the crisp afternoon air doing little to calm the frantic beating of my heart. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a declaration of independence. I was no longer a character in Marcus Carter's story. I was about to become the author of my own. The waiting room of the Genesis Prenatal Imaging Center was an oasis of forced tranquility. Soft classical music trickled from hidden speakers. The color palette was a soothing blend of beige and cream, and the chairs were plush leather that sighed when you sat down. It smelled faintly of lavender and money. It was the kind of place designed to make you forget the messy, clinical reality of what was happening, and instead sell you an experience. I chose a seat in the corner, my back to the wall, the large manila envelope resting in my lap. Frank, the process server, took a seat near the door, idly flipping through a magazine. a silent, imposing gargoyle in this temple of new life. I checked my watch. 1:55 p.m. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but on the outside I projected a stillness I did not feel. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my mind. I would not outcry. I would not scream. I would be surgical. At precisely 2:01 p.m., the frosted glass door swung open. And there they were. Marcus was holding the door for her, his hand resting on the small of her back. He was smiling that dazzling, confident smile that had once been reserved for me. Isabella Rossi was even more striking up close. She was younger than me, perhaps 26, with wide, dark eyes and a cascade of black hair. She was wearing a stylish, flowing maxi dress that accentuated her own small, neat baby bump. She looked radiant, happy, and completely oblivious. They approached the reception desk, their voices low and intimate. Marcus gave his name, his real name, the arrogant fool, and the receptionist. A polished woman with a headset smiled warmly. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Dr. Hanson will be with you in just a moment. Please have a seat." As they turned from the desk, Marcus's eyes scanned the waiting room. They swept past me once, a flicker of non-recognition, and then they snapped back. The change in his expression was seismic. The confident smile dissolved, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His face went pale, a sickly white under the expensive lights. He stopped dead, his hand falling away from Isabella's back as if he'd been burned. "Amelia." He breathed, his voice a strangled whisper. What are you doing here?" Isabella looked from his terrified face to mine. Her own smile faltered, replaced by a look of polite confusion. She saw my own pregnant belly, and a flicker of something disbelief crossed her features. I rose slowly from my chair, the leather sighing its protest. I walked towards them, my steps measured and deliberate. I stopped a few feet away, creating a triangle of unbearable tension in the serene waiting room. The other couple in the room looked down at their phones, suddenly desperate to be anywhere else. "Hello, Marcus." I said, my voice as calm and cool as the glass table in Naomi's office. "Funny seeing you here. I thought you had a board meeting." His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. His eyes darted from me to Isabella, then back to me, the cogs of his treacherous mind, grinding, trying to formulate a lie that could possibly contain this catastrophe. Isabella took a hesitant step forward. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft, addressing me, but looking at Marcus for an explanation. "Do I know you?" "No, you don't." I said, my gaze locked on my husband. "But I know you. You're Isabella. I'm Amelia. Amelia Hayes. I'm Marcus's wife." The word wife hung in the air, sharp and heavy as a guillotine. Isabella's face crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes, wide with shock, shot to Marcus. "Wife Marcus, you told me you were separated. You said the divorce was almost final." Marcus finally found his voice, a desperate, pathetic rasp. "Amelia, this is not the time or the place. We can talk about this at home." "No," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. "I don't think we can. Because you see, Marcus, you won't be coming home, not today, not ever." I took a step closer, holding up the manila envelope. "This," I announced, my voice loud enough for everyone in the quiet room to hear, "is for you." I didn't hand it to him. I held it out, forcing him to take it. His hand trembled as he reached for the envelope, his confident facade completely shattered. He looked utterly broken, a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Except the jar was our entire life. "What is this?" he stammered, fumbling with the clasp. "It's a court order." I said each word a precisely placed explosive charge. "A temporary restraining order, to be exact. It was granted ex parte by Judge Miller this morning. It freezes all of our joint financial assets. The bank accounts, the investment funds, everything. Effective immediately. It also grants me exclusive use of the house. You are legally barred from the property. All the details are in there." I'd read it carefully if I were you. Marcus stared at the papers he'd pulled from the envelope, his face a canvas of disbelief and horror. The master of the universe, the man who controlled millions with a keystroke, had just been financially neutered. Isabella, meanwhile, was staring at my stomach. The reality of the situation was crashing down on her in waves. You're pregnant," she whispered, her voice filled with a dawning, sickening understanding. "Very," I replied, not unkindly. 17 weeks, with his child, just like you." That was the final blow. Isabella let out a small, wounded sound and stumbled backward, catching herself on the arm of a chair. The lie wasn't just that he was married. The lie was total. He had sold her a future that was a mirror image of the one he'd promised me. She wasn't his one and only. She was his second in command, and she never even knew there was a first. Just then a door opened, and a woman in a white coat with a kind face appeared. "Marcus Carter," she said, her smile faltering as she took in the scene. "I'm Dr. Hanson. We're ready for you." Her voice trailed off as she registered the three of us, standing in a frozen tableau of misery and betrayal. Marcus looked up, his eyes wild with panic. He looked at the doctor, at the weeping Isabella, and finally at me. In my eyes, he found no sympathy, no lifeline, just the cool, hard finality of a demolition order. "I believe," I said, turning to the bewildered doctor, "that Mr. Carter will have to reschedule. He has some urgent legal and financial matters to attend to." I gave Frank, the process server, a slight nod. His job was done. He stood up, gave a grim, almost imperceptible nod back, and walked out, leaving the wreckage behind. I looked at Marcus one last time, at the architect of my pain, now standing amidst the ruins of his own making. I felt no triumph, no joy. Just a vast, empty sense of closure. I had taken back control. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the clinic, leaving him to explain the unexplainable to the woman carrying a child he'd sworn was his future with legal papers in his hand that proved his past had finally caught up with him. The lavender-scented air of the clinic gave way to the sharp, clean air of the city. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath of my new life. The drive home was surreal. The adrenaline that had coursed through me, a potent cocktail of rage and resolve, began to ebb, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I pulled into the driveway of the house, my house now according to the law. And for a moment, I just sat in the car, the engine ticking as it cooled. The stately brick home no longer looked like a fortress of dreams. It looked like a beautiful empty museum of a life that was no longer mine. Inside, the silence was absolute. It was no longer the tense, resentful silence of a failing marriage, but the clean, empty silence of a new beginning. I walked through the rooms, my hand trailing along the cool marble of the kitchen island, a place where Marcus and I had shared countless meals. I went upstairs and stood in the doorway of what was to be the nursery. The walls were still a neutral primer, waiting for the color I could never decide on. Now the blankness felt appropriate. It was a blank canvas. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my reverie. It was Naomi. "It's done," I said, my voice hollow. "I know. The process server called me." "You were magnificent," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "How are you, the real how?" "Empty," I admitted. "And tired. But I'm okay. I think I will be." "Good. Now listen to me, Amelia. This is just the beginning. He's going to retaliate. He'll call, he'll beg, he'll threaten. He'll try to get his own lawyer to vacate the TRO. Do not engage. Do not answer his calls. Let everything go through me. Are we clear?" "Crystal," I said. The first call came less than an hour later. "Marcus." I stared at the name on my screen and hit ignore. It was immediately followed by a text. "Amelia, please, we need to talk. This is a nightmare. You don't understand everything. I can explain." Then another. "I am locked out of our accounts. My cards are being declined. You can't do this. Think about our baby. His invoking of our child, the one he had so easily betrayed, sent a fresh wave of cold anger through me. I blocked his number without a second thought. The next few days were a blur of legal activity. Naomi was right. Marcus had hired one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the city, a man named Sterling Vance, whose specialty was making messy situations even messier. They immediately filed a motion to dissolve the TRO, claiming I was an emotionally unstable, vindictive spouse acting out of baseless jealousy. "Baseless," Naomi scoffed over the phone. "We have the condo lease, the wire transfer, the credit card statements, and a waiting room full of witnesses to his little domestic drama. Let them try." But as Naomi and her team dug deeper in preparation for the hearing, they uncovered something far more sinister than an affair. The $50,000 wire transfer and the lavish gifts weren't just coming from marital savings. They were part of a much larger, more desperate picture. "Amelia," Naomi said, her voice grim during a late-night call, "Marcus isn't just a cheat. He's in trouble. Deep trouble." It turned out that Marcus's volatile market wasn't just an excuse for late nights. His fund had taken a catastrophic hit 6 months ago on a series of high-risk energy trades. He hadn't just lost his investors' money. He'd lost a significant portion of our own personal fortune, which he had secretly leveraged without my knowledge. He was trying to hide the losses, shuffling money between accounts, borrowing from lines of credit, and trying to win it all back with even riskier bets. The affair with Isabella wasn't a symptom of boredom or a midlife crisis. It was part of his desperate fantasy. He was a sinking ship, and he'd been trying to build himself a brand new, shiny lifeboat, complete with a beautiful woman and a new baby, a testament to a success that was now pure fiction. The money he lavished on her wasn't just to keep her happy. It was to keep himself believing in the illusion that he was still the powerful, untouchable Marcus Carter. He hadn't been draining our assets simply to fund an affair. He had been hemorrhaging money everywhere in a desperate attempt to stay afloat. The TRO hadn't just cut off his access to his mistress. It had cut off his ability to continue his frantic shell game. We hadn't just exposed his infidelity. We had inadvertently lit the fuse on a financial time bomb. The twist didn't end there. 2 weeks after the showdown at the clinic, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simply, "A plea." My first instinct was to delete it, assuming it was Marcus trying to get around the block. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Ms. Hayes, it began. I know you have no reason to listen to me, and every reason to hate me. I do not expect your forgiveness. I am writing to you, because I believe we were both deceived, and I am in a situation I don't know how to handle. Marcus has not been answering my calls since that day. His promises have evaporated, along with his financial support. I have been served an eviction notice from the apartment he leased for me. I have spent the last 2 weeks questioning every single thing he ever told me. He lied about you. He lied about his divorce. He lied about the future he was building for us. It has made me question the one thing I thought was real, our child. I am writing to you to ask for something unimaginable. I have an appointment for a non-invasive prenatal paternity test next week. It requires a DNA sample from the potential father. Since he is unreachable, the lab said a sample from a known direct relative, like a legitimate child or a parent, could also work. Though a direct sample from the other woman involved in the affair is more accurate. I know this is an insane request, but would you consider providing a sample I need to know the truth? For my baby's sake. I need to know if my child is tied to that man, to his lies. Whatever the result, I will not bother you again. Sincerely, Isabella Rossi. I stared at the email, my mind reeling. My enemy, the other woman, was asking for my help. She was just as lost as I had been, cast adrift by the same man. She had been a villain in my story, but now I saw her as something else, a fellow victim. Our babies, conceived in deception on his part, tied us together in a bizarre, unfortunate sorority. My gut reaction was to say no. Why should I help her? Why should I lift a finger for the woman who had slept with my husband? But then I thought about her child, an innocent just like mine. Didn't that child deserve to be born into a world of truth, not one built on the shaky foundations of Marcus Carter's lies? And a part of me, the part that craved absolute certainty, needed to know too. I picked up my phone and forwarded the email to Naomi. Her reply was instantaneous. Holy hell. Don't answer yet. Let me think. An hour later, she called back. Okay, she said, her voice a mix of astonishment and strategic calculation. This is a gift from the legal gods. If that baby isn't his entire counter-narrative of being a man who fell in love with 2 women and wanted to do right by both his children completely implodes. It exposes him as nothing more than a common philanderer who was caught. So I should do it, I asked. Yes, Naomi said firmly, but on our terms. I'll have the lab results sent directly to my office. We control the information. This isn't about helping her, Amelia. This is about arming ourselves for the final battle. I knew she was right, legally. But as I drafted my reply to Isabella, I realized it was about more than that. It was about 2 women caught in one man's destructive storm, helping each other find a small patch of solid ground. Isabella, I wrote. I will do it. The decision to meet Isabella was one I made with my head, not my heart. My heart wanted nothing to do with her. It wanted to nurse its wounds in private, to seal off the part of my life Marcus had contaminated, and pretend it never existed. But Naomi's strategic voice echoed in my mind. We control the information. This is about arming ourselves. So I agreed, suggesting a sterile, anonymous cafe downtown, a place with no history for either of us. A clean slate for a dirty conversation. I arrived early, securing a secluded booth in the back. The cafe was a symphony of neutrals, much like the waiting room at the Genesis Clinic. But this time, the beige tones felt less like a comfort and more like a void, I ordered a chamomile tea, and the warm mug did little to chase away the chill that had taken up permanent residence in my bones. I watched the door, my stomach, a knot of dread and grim determination. What does one say to the woman who was living a life parallel to your own, a life funded by your shared assets and built on the same foundation of lies? When Isabella finally walked in, she looked nothing like the confident, glowing woman I had confronted a few weeks prior. The designer dress was gone, replaced by simple jeans and a nondescript sweater. Her lustrous dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her face devoid of makeup was pale and haunted. She had been stripped of the borrowed glow Marcus had provided, and what was left was a young woman who looked lost and terrified. She scanned the cafe, her eyes wide and anxious, clutching a large, worn leather purse to her chest, as if it were a life raft. Our eyes met, and she flinched, taking a hesitant step before steeling herself and walking towards my booth. She slid onto the vinyl seat opposite me, placing the purse on the table between us like a barricade. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice a fragile whisper that was nearly swallowed by the cafe's ambient noise. "And for what you're doing. The test." I took a slow sip of my tea, letting the silence stretch, wanting her to understand that I was not here for pleasantries. "Let's be clear, Isabella," I said, my voice even and cold. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm certainly not doing it for him. I'm doing it because there are 2 children who will be born into this mess. They at least deserve the simple dignity of the truth." She winced but nodded, accepting the sharp edge of my words. She deserved it. "I understand," she said, looking down at her tightly clasped hands on the table. "He told me you were cold," she confessed, the words tumbling out, as if she could no longer hold them in. "Detached. He said the marriage was a formality, that you hadn't been in love for years. He painted this picture of you as this career-obsessed ice queen, and him as this lonely man, trapped and wanting a real family." Each word was a small, sharp sting. It was the classic cheater's handbook, painting the wife as a monster to justify his own monstrosity. "And you believed him?" I asked, a note of incredulity in my tone. "I wanted to," she admitted, her gaze finally lifting to meet mine. Her eyes were swimming with unshed tears. "He was so charming, so convincing. He'd talk about the divorce as if it were a done deal, just paperwork. He'd say things like, 'Amelia and I are just business partners now, we're better as co-parents.' He made it all sound so incredibly logical and civilized. Marcus is an expert at making betrayal sound civilized." I replied, the words tasting like ash. I watched her, and the burning hatred I had nurtured for weeks began to be complicated by an unwelcome feeling, a sliver of pity. She wasn't a master manipulator. She was a pawn, just as I had been, albeit a more willing one. He had identified her ambition and her loneliness, and had expertly woven a fantasy tailored just for her. "The day at the clinic," she continued, her voice cracking, "when I saw you, and I saw you were pregnant, it was like the world tilted off its axis. Every single thing he had ever built for me. The apartment, the gallery show, he funded the promises of us raising our baby in a brownstone. It all turned to dust. I wasn't his future. I was just his secret. I was the affair." "Welcome to the club," I said, the sarcasm a thin veil over my own remembered pain. "He was selling you a blueprint for a life he was already failing to build with me." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 women on opposite sides of the same shipwreck. I finally pushed a napkin dispenser towards her. "The test is tomorrow at 10. My lawyer, Naomi Bennett, has arranged for a courier from the lab. They will take my sample from her office and meet you at the collection center. The results will be sent directly and only to her." Isabella nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Thank you," she said again, her voice thick with emotion. I have to know. I can't bring a child into the world if he's tied to that man. To all those lies. That was the one thing we could agree on. Our meeting ended as awkwardly as it began. We were not allies. We were not friends. We were two separate parties with a mutual interest in uncovering the truth, a truth that we both suspected would be devastating in its own way. The week that followed was an exercise in controlled anxiety. I busied myself with practicalities, assembling a crib, washing tiny clothes, meeting with contractors to discuss renovating my home office into a brighter, sunnier space. But underneath it all, a low hum of anticipation vibrated through me. Every phone call made my heart leap. Naomi was a fortress of calm, assuring me that whatever the result, we were in a position of strength. "If it's his," she'd said in a call, "it proves his motive for draining the accounts. If it's not his, well, if it's not his Amelia, we're not just bringing a knife to a gunfight. We're bringing a nuclear bomb." The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was staring at a wall of paint swatches, trying to decide between sunbeam yellow and morning light when my phone rang with Naomi's name. I sank onto a nearby packing box, my hand trembling as I answered. "Are you sitting down?" Naomi asked, her voice taut with an energy I could feel through the phone. "I am now," I breathed. "I have the email with the certified lab report open on my screen," she said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "It's a PDF, password protected. I just entered it." More silence. I could hear the faint click of her mouse. "Okay, I'm reading it. Exclusion. Amelia. The probability of paternity for Marcus Carter is 0%. I gasped the air, leaving my lungs in a rush. 0%. It wasn't just an exclusion. It was an annihilation of his entire narrative. All the drama, the second life, the promises made to Isabella, the risk he took blowing up our marriage, all for a child that had absolutely no biological connection to him. The sheer tragic absurdity of it was overwhelming. "He's not the father," I whispered the words, feeling foreign and monumental. "He's not the father," Naomi confirmed, a note of savage triumph in her voice. "Our boy Marcus built an entire shadow family on a foundation of quicksand. This report doesn't just damage his legal case, Amelia. It demolishes it. It makes him a liar, a philanderer, and a fool all in one fell swoop. Sterling Vance can't spin this. No one can." Isabella's email followed a day later after Naomi had officially informed her lawyer. It was short and full of anguish. She had contacted her ex-boyfriend, the artist. After a tearful, difficult conversation, he had admitted it was a possibility. He was willing to take a test. She was humiliated and horrified, and she ended the email with a single chilling line. "I am now truly alone." I felt a pang of something cold and distant for her, but my focus was singular: the courtroom. The day of the hearing was grey and overcast, the sky the color of concrete. The courtroom itself was intimidating, all dark wood and high ceilings designed to make you feel small. Marcus was already there, standing beside his lawyer, Sterling Vance. Vance was the epitome of a high-priced attorney, impeccable suit, smug smile, and the predatory stillness of a shark. Marcus, however, looked like a man coming apart at the seams. His expensive suit hung on him, and he had the sallow, hollowed-out look of someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw a flicker of desperate hope in his. He still thought he could talk his way out of this. I met his gaze with a look as cold and hard as the marble floors. Vance began his voice smooth and condescending. He painted a masterful, disgusting picture of me as the hysterical, hormonal, pregnant wife, emotionally unstable and prone to vengeful fantasies. He argued that the tool was an act of punitive aggression that was crippling Mr. Carter's ability to conduct business and manage his affairs. "Your Honor," he concluded, "this is a domestic dispute that has been escalated into a financial crucifixion by a woman scorned." Then it was Naomi's turn. She rose with a grace and confidence that seemed to suck all the air out of Vance's argument. She was a vision of lethal professionalism. "Your Honor," she began, her voice crisp and clear, "Mr. Vance's portrayal of my client is as fictional as his client's commitment to fidelity. This isn't about a woman scorned. It's about a marital partner protecting the marital estate from a man who has systematically defrauded it." One by one, she laid out the evidence: the lease for Isabella's condo, the credit card statements from Cartier, the wire transfer for $50,000. With each piece of paper she submitted, Vance's smug smile tightened. "My client does not deny the relationship," Vance countered smoothly, rising to his feet. "He is a man who regrettably fell in love with 2 women. It is a complicated human situation, but he is an honorable man. Your Honor, he was and is fully prepared to support both mothers and to be a father to both his children." Naomi's lips curved into a dangerous smile. It was the trap she had been waiting for him to walk into. "I find that claim about both his children particularly fascinating." "Your Honor," Naomi said, her voice resonating with theatrical gravity. She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. "Because while Mr. Carter was busy making these honorable plans, we were busy dealing in facts. And we have recently come into possession of a fact that fundamentally alters the nature of this entire case." She picked up a sealed, notarized envelope from her table and began to walk towards the judge's bench. The courtroom went silent. I could see Marcus's confusion, a slight furrow in his brow. He shot a look at Vance, who merely shrugged, confident in his position. "Your Honor," Naomi said, holding the envelope, "this is a certified lab report from a non-invasive prenatal paternity test performed on Ms. Isabella Rossi just last week. The results, I assure you, are quite conclusive." The word paternity detonated in the quiet room. Vance's jaw went slack. Marcus's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. The judge peered over his glasses, his interest piqued. "Let me see that, Ms. Bennett." Naomi handed the report to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. As he read it, his eyebrows climbed his forehead. Naomi turned her body slightly, so she was addressing not just the judge, but the entire room, her gaze finally landing on Marcus like a judgment. "For the court's record," she announced, her voice ringing with finality, "the report concludes with 99.9% scientific certainty that Marcus Carter is not the biological father of Miss Rossi's child." A collective gasp went through the gallery. Sterling Vance looked as though he'd been electrocuted. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Marcus staggered backward, physically recoiling as if he'd been struck. The entire edifice of his deceit, his last pathetic claim to a shred of honor, had not just been cracked, it had been publicly pulverized. He was not a tragic hero torn between 2 loves. He was just a pathetic common cheat who had been caught a fool who had torched his own life for a fantasy that was never even real. The judge dropped the report on his desk and glared at Marcus with utter contempt. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice dripping with ice. "Given this new information, your client's entire argument seems to be predicated on a series of profound falsehoods. The motion to dissolve the temporary restraining order is denied. Ms. Hayes will retain exclusive use of the marital home, and the assets will remain frozen. I suggest you advise your client to cooperate fully from here on out." The fight evaporated from Marcus Carter that day. Humiliated, exposed, and financially crippled, he was a ghost. The final nail in his coffin was a call Naomi received not from Sterling Vance, but from the lead counsel for Carter Senior Capital. Marcus's father, Arthur Carter, was a titan of old money who valued reputation above all else. His son had become a public embarrassment and a financial liability. The message was cold and clear. Fix this, make it go away, and spare the family name any further disgrace. The divorce was no longer a negotiation. It was a surrender. The Carter family wanted silence. I wanted freedom. They agreed to a settlement that was swift and overwhelmingly in my favor. I received the house free and clear, a large ironclad trust for Lily's future, and a portion of the remaining assets that ensured I would never have to depend on anyone again. Months later, the grey skies of that courtroom battle felt like a distant memory. I stood in the nursery, bathed in the warm glow of the yellow paint I had finally chosen. In my arms, I held my daughter Lily, who was just over a month old. She was so small, so perfect, her chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of sleep. My daughter. My future. The grand house was quieter now, but the silence was filled with peace, not tension. It was no longer a monument to a failed partnership, but the foundation of a new life, a structure I was building on my own terms. I had walked through the wreckage, survived the demolition, and in the clean, sunlit space where my old life used to be, I was finally and truly home. Amelia's story is a harrowing reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of the deepest betrayals. But it's also a powerful testament to the strength that can be forged in the fires of heartbreak. She transformed herself from a victim of her husband's deceit into the architect of her own liberation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life, her name, and her future for herself and for her child. Her journey from silent suspicion to public vindication shows that when a foundation is rotten, the bravest thing you can do is tear it all down and build something true and beautiful in its place. What would you have done in Amelia's shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life dramas that explore the depths of human resilience.